because we want to really get our shoulder close to the floor so we're not dropping from a high position. I see a lot of people make this mistake here. And then this last piece is he's going to...
Hey parkour nerds, we are back here once again at Origins Parkour, Coach Renee, Coach Tom, and today we are going to be going into different kinds of roll entries. So we did a previous video, which you can check out somewhere up here, on roll exits, and today we're going to be talking about the various ways you can enter a roll and what they might be used for. So once again, we are going to begin with the classic.
The classic, of course.
And I'm going to get Coach Tom to walk me through this one.
Cool. So we're just actually going to start on our knees for this one. Eventually we'll want to take it up to our feet, but this is a great way to start. So he's going to place his hands down in front, palms flat on the floor. Now that's straight in front of him, so I'm going to get him to just kind of move over just a little bit to the sides because it's a little bit off axis here. So from this position, he's going to place his forearm down because we need to lower ourselves down closer to the floor. This next part is kind of the awkward part of the movement, and that's folding that shoulder as close to his hand as possible. And the reason for that is because we want to really get our shoulder close to the floor so we're not dropping from a high position. I see a lot of people make this mistake here. And then this last piece is he's going to put his left ear to his left shoulder like he's holding a phone without his hands. And then from that position, he's actually just going to push his hips all the way over top. And that's the classic roll entry. And this is going to be really useful in getting you to lower yourself down to the floor and utilizing the muscles in your upper body to control you down, which leads us to the next one, which is not my favorite technique for rolls, but Renee, you want to talk about the scoop tech.
So the scoop, and so we did start the video saying classic for the two-armed entry, and that's how rolls were introduced to me when I started parkour. Is that the first way that you learned to roll?
The classic version? Mm-hmm. I was actually introduced to the scoop technique. Okay. I think there was like a tutorial that was just like a bunch of images showing like, oh, and then imagine you're holding a barrel, and it was like, okay. And that's how I started, and through many trial and errors, I ended up with a roll bump on my shoulder and eventually the better technique, the classic technique. So
I think with the scoop, I think it's more of like a martial arts technique.
Yes.
And I think that's why it sort of gets into parkour is because from martial arts, a lot of people did parkour, including both of us. We both did some like classic martial arts in our adolescenthood and then got into parkour after that. But anyway, the scoop is you're using this arm to drag through. And I don't use it too much anymore. I used to use it to teach beginners sometimes if they were having trouble with the two-handed entry, but I think now we have lots of drills and things to help people learn it. But initially, it's kind of like easier just to follow that hand and get through. So if I'm going at the camera this way, I can scoop through like that. But we don't really like this one. Why don't we like it?
Yeah, there's a couple reasons. I think this initial kind of scooping kind of turns the body quite a bit. But the big reason for me is it limits your ability to like absorb the impact with your arms. And we're gonna get into like some other roll variations that are similar to the scoop, but more applicable in more scenarios, in my opinion. But the big reason is we don't want to just drop down to our shoulder or back. We want to try to guide ourselves down. So the classic, in my view, should make up the bulk of your roll practice, and for good reason, because it's more useful for diving techniques and more useful for taking impact, which is the main reason we do rolls in general.
So you just kind of alluded to the other two, and what we're going to talk about now are roll entry techniques that kind of start to fall into more of like a style category, freestyle move, trick, if you will. Although you like to think everything is a trick when it comes to parkour. We have our illusions and things. And I guess the scoop is also kind of like, maybe if you want to put a different flavor on your roll, you could use it. But we have another variation of using one hand, and we can
Yeah.
Tell them about that.
So I just call this a one-handed roll, and it's very similar to the scoop, but the scoop goes across like this. The one-handed roll is actually more just kind of like tilted down. You could go out to the side like this. The really main thing is that you're kind of internally rotating at the shoulder, and then you're exposing the back of your shoulder, the back of your arm to the initial contact point. So this one hand is kind of guiding you and giving you a bit of support, and then you're kind of going down to the back of your arm and to your back. So again, you can kind of scoop straight down or just kind of keep that arm out to the side. But that's the way that move works. And this is actually really useful for when you don't have a lot of space. So if you're like doing a roll on a small surface, I'm not gonna do it here, but just as an example is like a small surface like this, I don't have a lot of room to fit all the pieces of my body onto it. So if I can get one hand on, then I can just use that to guide myself to the back, and that's where this would be applicable, where I would actually be able to use a one hand to support and then just guide it to my back. And then do you want to talk about the no-handed roll?
I think you want to talk about the
I'll
no-handed
talk about
roll.
the no-handed roll. So no-handed roll, again, it's kind of like you can call it a party trick. It's kind of cool. It's like definitely more stylized than a traditional or a classic roll or some of these other ones that we're talking about. But the way I like to think about it is if you get really good at rolling with no hands, then all your rolls with hands are going to be better. So the way a no-handed roll works, so just like I talked about before, the one-handed roll here, the no-handed or the other arm is kind of turned out to the side or kind of tucked under. The no-handed roll is the same movement, it's just you're eliminating this part and you're just trusting that you know how to guide yourself onto the back. So I'm gonna just show one here. I'm gonna kind of internally rotate that shoulder, tuck my head out of the way, and just push myself into it. So what you actually, if you practice this, what you'll actually notice is you're contacting a lot of your arm, and that's actually the way a lot of rolls should be. It's more of, I think it's a misnomer. We call it a shoulder roll, right? A lot of people think shoulder, but a lot of the time we want to really go around the back side of the arm, and that's what's going to really make it smooth, and that's going to be exposing us to more muscle instead of just this bony parts. Doesn't matter how muscular.
This bony part here, yeah, you can still, and I have
Yeah.
before. When we get to this
Renee's
back here.
Renee's a strong dude. Look at all these muscles, right? But he still has bone here. I'm touching bone. So if I can touch the bone on a muscular guy like this, then we definitely know that even scrawny people are going to have a problem with rolling directly over the shoulder. So again, I think it's a misnomer to call it a shoulder roll, but for all intents and purposes, it kind of gets across the idea that we're trying to.
Yeah, and so to kind of wrap up this conversation, you mentioned using these two variations on smaller surfaces. So like there's surfaces where if I chose to roll on it, I wouldn't be able to do the classic, so there's not enough room for my hands. And I think you see a lot of examples in popular video out right now, Project Dive Roll 2, with Denister. He's rolling on rails and stuff like that, which a lot of athletes can do now. And he's just really kind of pushing that. But it's also a lot of cases where it's a choice to roll. Like it's a trick that's being performed. Like you could do a Kong, you could do some other sort of move. But other than style, what are some of the reasons why to practice this one-handed or no-handed roll?
Yeah, so I already kind of alluded to it, but it's this idea that you want to have a really deep practice in these skills. So a shoulder roll in particular, in order to get really good at it, you have to be able to apply it across scenarios and then just have a lot of variations on it. So if you have a really solid no-handed roll, your classic roll is going to be excellent because you know exactly where to put the ground or the wall or the structure onto your back. And I think this is what makes Denister and some of these other guys so good at shoulder rolls is they can when they can use their hands, they can guide that rail directly to the part of the back that they want it to, I imagine CP is really good at rolling without his hands too. So again, a deep practice in your rolls is going to really enhance your ability to apply your rolls across scenarios.
Nice. Well, that's all the information we have for you today. Please leave us a comment. If you have any questions about roll technique, we do have some tutorials for things like this in the work, and we will see you in the next video.